Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Monday, December 22nd, 2025. Alastair Crooke will be with us in just a moment. When the Gaza peace deal collapses, if it's even a peace deal, will Netanyahu blame Trump? But first, this. History tells us every market eventually falls. Currencies collapse. And look at where we are now. 38 trillion in national debt. Stocks at record highs defying gravity. So what happens next? Groceries, gas, housing, everything's going up. And this dollar, it buys less every day. When the system breaks, your stocks won't save you and your dollars won't either. But one thing will: gold. I've said it on my show for years. Gold survives collapse. Central bankers know this and billionaires know it. That's why they're buying more. Is it too late to buy, or is it just the right time? Call my friends at Lear Capital to find out. Ask questions, get the free information. There's no pressure, and that's why I buy my gold and silver from Lear. And right now, you can get up to $20,000 in bonus metals with a qualified purchase. Call 800-511-4620 or go to LearJudgeNap.com today. Alastair, welcome here, my dear friend. I'm fascinated with some of your writings. I'm always fascinated with your writings over the weekend, one of which opined that there are people in the Middle East who believe that President Trump is more interested in acquiring Arab money than he is in bringing peace in the Middle East. Is there much of a basis for that view?
Yes. Oh, definitely. Within Israel, within the circles around Netanyahu, they are becoming rather, can I put it a bit sort of bluntly, there's a certain degree of buyer's remorse that having put Trump into his position in the United States, they expected something rather different. And they feel he puts, if you like, the relationship with Saudi Arabia and Qatar and the UAE higher than that of Israel in many cases. I'm not saying that he does. I'm saying this is the feeling that exists within Israel, is that he is sort of mesmerized by the billions, the trillions on offer, and his family are making so much money out of that, that by comparison, Israel's interests are becoming subsidiary to the interests of the Gulf states with their money and their projects, and Trump building towers in various parts of the Middle East, but also the family, the Witkoff children, the Trump children, all making lots of money out of the Gulf. So they see it as pulling him away from Trump, if you like, Netanyahu's interests. And they see that in practical terms. They see that in terms of the Gaza ceasefire, where they are completely at odds with Trump on this. Netanyahu wants the first part of the second stage, which you recall, Trump deliberately left undefined to get the ceasefire going, and then left that. But Netanyahu wants Hamas disarmed and removed from power, first thing. Then international forces, all the rest later. And of course, what Trump is proposing is the reverse. International forces, technocratic government, and then finally at the end of the process, look at what to do about Hamas. So that's a real rift. But the rift exists also on Syria, because Trump would like an agreement. I mean, Tom Barak virtually says this. What Trump wants is an agreement, something, headline, something that, Syria and Netanyahu shown sort of, coming together, and there's a great PR exercise there. And Netanyahu and Israel actually just want to be able to have freedom of military action wherever they choose across Syria. And that, of course, is disrupting Tom Barak's plans for some sort of, event which will signal a sort of coming together of the new Syrian regime and Israel. And the same with Lebanon. Israel wants to keep bombing the south of Lebanon and wants to keep bombing Hezbollah in complete flagrance of the agreements of the ceasefire. And really, what Tom Barak wants, and which is what Witkoff had suggested some time ago in his talk with Tucker Carlson. And he said, actually, we want Lebanon to normalize with Israel and to become part of the accords. So all of these things are causing a sense of division in the Netanyahu camp just before he is going to Miami, I think on the 27th or 28th. He flies on the 28th. Netanyahu and family are going to Miami, to Palm Beach on the 28th, and are expecting to have a meeting with Trump on that day, although Trump is standing off a bit, and they say, well, it hasn't been put in finally on the agenda. Well, Netanyahu is expecting two meetings, one on the 29th and one later. And at the moment, it's unconfirmed. But this touches on the other issue, which is really irritating, if you like, Israelis, and where they are questioning the merits, the value of Trump, his presidency. And that is the question of Iran. Because in the question of Iran, Netanyahu has made it very clear this is still a top priority. But the dilemma is Trump attacked these these sites in Iran, and claims everything was obliterated. Nothing to do here. No more to see, nothing to see, let's move on. And what Bibi is planning, he has just appointed his military secretary as the head of Mossad. And Mossad only works to the prime minister, no one else. And his military secretary is known to have sort of radical ideas on Israel's nuclear deterrent, Roman Goffman. And so, and is thought to think rather similarly to Netanyahu. So there is a suggestion in Israel that this is the motive, the real motive to this forthcoming visit to Mar-a-Lago, if it happens, on the 29th of January, the summit, going to be an important one, because really how Netanyahu has a new way of presenting it to Trump, or at least he hopes to have a new way. So he's not going to go in and talk about their nuclear weapons, per se, because Trump says they're obliterated. So what he's saying is, oh, beware. Actually, Iran is rebuilding its ballistic missile capability. It's really not just rearming, it's reorganizing it. It's doing it in a different way, and it's a threat. And what he's doing is conflating the two. He says, well, these new missiles, this new defense capacities that Iran is getting, actually is covering for the nuclear one. This is going to be the shield for the nuclear program. So we won't be able to hit the nuclear programs if we had to, if they continue with these ballistic missiles and these missile program. So he's conflating the two together to say, what we're really targeting is the ballistic program, and we want you to assist. We can do it alone, but it would be much better if the United States comes and assists us.
So Netanyahu is going to make the argument that Iran does not have the moral or legal authority to build ballistic missiles to protect itself from an attack from Israel.
Exactly. He's going to conflate the two things together and say, the danger now from Iran, we thought it was the nuclear program, but no, it's really their new rearmament with their missiles, their air defenses. They're putting new defensive systems across Iran, which would prevent us in any case being able to take action against the nuclear program. So this is how he's going to present it, according to all the reports in the Hebrew press about the plans for this meeting. And he will talk about the stage 2 in Gaza. But really, I mean, they've already made a decision. They're not going to go and attack Trump on the Gaza. They're just going to let it fail. They believe that Trump's phase 2 is almost certain to fail. Events will overcome it, and it will fail.
What is, I mean, we know that the ceasefire has been a failure because the IDF is killing people because they mistakenly cross imaginary lines that are not even shown on the ground. But what is supposed to happen in phase 2? Is this Tony Blair becoming the governor general?
I think actually he's being kicked out. Apparently the Arab states were successful. Again, Arab state, again, it comes back to that money issue. Trump being mesmerized by the trillions, listened to the Arab states who said, Blair is not the person for this. But there's no agreement on what to do, what this international security force. But it's supposed to come in, and they want Egypt particularly to come in. Now, Egypt Sisi may be in Miami more or less at the same time, and you can guess what's being planned, another sort of great, love-in at Mar-a-Lago between Sisi and Netanyahu. Only Sisi is very reluctant to be engaged in this and very reluctant to participate in this international security force because he thinks it means disarming Hamas. And that's going to cause a huge ruction internally in Egypt.
Right. But that's why would Hamas disarm while Netanyahu and his fanatics are running the government when they've said they want to slaughter every Palestinian?
Well, that's precisely what Hamas has said. We're not disarming. And this is causing that's why Netanyahu's so angry with Trump, because Trump isn't insisting on that. And the disarming of Hamas is the first priority. He's saying, well, let's get the security force, let's get a technocratic government into Gaza first, and then eventually we can think about what to do about Hamas. And some people in Washington have been saying, well, Hamas might just have to be a part of the new government. And Netanyahu, who hates this language, dislikes it intensely. And so there really are sort of sense of, disappointment. And I would go as far as saying, sometimes they would, Netanyahu talks about his discussions with Trump, and he says, he comes out exhausted, and he says, you never know where you are when you're talking to Trump. It's exhausting. And then one day it's one thing, the next day it's another thing. You never know where you are with him. And this is why I think that approaching the nuclear thing, because Trump tried to block it by saying, oh, it's obliterated. We don't have to discuss this. So they're coming at it at this angle from the ballistic missile side in order to say, no, well, now we need to do, it's the missiles that are a problem, because that's what's enabling Iran to continue with its nuclear program. And all of this is really at odds because they just don't trust that Trump will back them up on Iran, because he gave the green light, but then he said it's been obliterated, which rather sort of put a ceiling to that, if you like, project. So they're not happy. And, this is coming in a background of, general feeling of mistrust, which you see. I know others are going to talk about Venezuela and so on. But, now the 3 ships have been seized. Now a Russian ship has been attacked in the Mediterranean with drones. Apparently, the SBU, that's the that is the Ukrainian secret service, claim that they did this and they damaged this tanker as it was leaving the Mediterranean. But all of these, are suggesting very much both to China and indeed to Russia. And they say, well, look, we read the NSS, the strategic statement, which said China is no longer, a primary threat, but it is an economic competitor. And look what's happening. You've just seized, a Chinese-owned Panama flag tanker going from Venezuela to China. Do you think we're going to just sit back and think this is, business as usual? I mean, this is lawless, completely lawless.
Well, it's an act of war. I mean, these seizures and blockades are actually defined as an act of war. I just want to bring it back to Gaza for a minute, because there was this, and you commented on it in one of your writings over the weekend, there was this bizarre statement made at a Hanukkah party at the White House, where the American uber Zionist Fox commentator Mark Levin referred to President Trump as the first Jewish president. And Trump, even though, of course, he's not Jewish, agreed. And then Trump went on to say, you're lucky you have me, because most American conservatives hate Israel. How were statements like that viewed by the Zionists or the Netanyahu people?
They view it as damaging. Just to be clear, I mean, you might imagine that they would be sort of pleased that the suggestion that they had the first Jewish president of the United States, but they're not, because they can see what's happening and they're acutely aware how the wind is changing amongst young Americans, particularly in the MAGA form. And they will have seen, and they followed very closely, the arguments at TPUSA that has just concluded in the US. And they see, the strong feelings that are generated. And so I think they would have thought this, and the embrace that was given to Miriam Adelson again after the Knesset one, but, yes, you got everything you asked for from me. I mean, they see this as gratuitously rubbing up the America Firsters in the wrong way. And so, in many ways, I mean, I think they would be, and someone put it like this, I think they'd be quite happy if he actually just disappeared. Trump, that is. I don't know. I mean, I'm not suggesting they have any plans to disappear him at all. I wouldn't say that. But I'm saying, they're looking at the midterm elections and what the prognostications are there. And I think, they're reviewing their endorsement and their support for Trump, and thinking, well, what next? And where should Israel go, given that its first priority is to command, the conservative Republican element in the United States?
Here's Secretary of State Rubio on Friday sounding his Zionist best. Chris, cut number 16.
Everyone wants peace. No one wants to return to a war. If Hamas is ever in a position in the future that they can threaten or attack Israel, you're not going to have peace. Okay? You're not going to convince anyone to invest money in Gaza if they believe another war is going to happen in 2 to 3 years. So I would just ask everyone to focus on what are the kind of weaponries and capabilities that Hamas would need in order to threaten or attack Israel as a baseline for what disarmament needs to look like. Because you're not going to have peace. If 2 years from now Hamas is launching rockets or killing Israelis or carrying out, God forbid, another 7th of October type terrorist attack and so forth, you're not going to have peace. So who's going to invest in a peace Who's going to invest in rebuilding a place that's going to get destroyed again in a future war? So that's why disarmament is so critical. Now, what that entails, we're going to leave that to the technical teams to work on. It would have to be something, obviously, that they're willing to agree to, that our partners can push them and pressure them to agree to. It also has to be something that Israel agrees to. In order for that to work, both sides have to agree on it, and we need the space to do it. But that's the way to think about it, okay? You cannot have a Hamas that can threaten Israel in the future. If they can, you won't have peace.
Has blinders on. The IDF is continuing to slaughter children because they wandered to the wrong side of the street.
Exactly. But I think it also underlines something that I think is quite dangerous for the United States, this fracture that exists between what people are suggesting is anti-Semitism and support for Israel. Because really in the middle of this, what everyone is saying, well, you know, Islamists are the threat that we must remove, that we have to be fighting Islamists. And as you may recall, I mean, long ago, I mean, more than 20 years ago, I was warning the United States, and I went to Washington specifically to say, it is a great danger to define everything as political Islam and to make no differentiation between groups that are not a threat to the United States or to the West and others that are distinctly dangerous and threatening to the United States and to Europe as a whole. And I said, it will end up with bombs in your cities if you go down the route of supporting the most extreme Islamic jihadist, I mean, the jihadist elements of it, and call it all political Islam. Is a Sufi an Islamist and therefore must be killed as an enemy? Of course not. Is an Islamist who simply wants to live in a society in the values of Islam? And there are values, good values in Islam, as well as there are factions of Islam which are a threat to us. But unless there's a differentiation and an understanding, a differential understanding that some groups are a real threat, and they are the threat, and others are not a threat, and that Muslims may want to live in a society under Islamic values, is another thing. But we seem to be going down the road again after all these years that I mentioned to Washington long ago, just to call everything, you know, political Islam, without differentiating, without understanding it, without making a separation of the components and treating them differentially. Then we will end up alienating much more of the Islamic world than we intend or want, and moving us towards a confrontation, because the outcome of this dilemma, a real argument that is taking place within United States about, you know, the role of Israel within the American polity, could backfire in terms of, if you like, just categorizing nearly all Muslims, whatever their background and whatever their sentiments, as Islamists, dangerous, like conflating, you know, these movements in Palestine with, if you like, the jihadists of the Wahhabist jihadists that we've seen in Iraq and elsewhere, the headcutters, all those people, those dangerous people who support the management of savagery as their guiding piece of work. Those people, I mean, need to be, if you like, removed. But who's supporting those? The Friends of America, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, both Wahhabi states. That's where it came from. Originally, it came from, actually, to go right back, it came back from the father of Kim Philby, the famous spy. He was an advisor to Ibn Saud in the last century. And he said to Ibn Saud, look, we will support you against the other factions in the Middle East. And Wahhabism is the tool that you can use. These extremists from the Negev Desert, these are the tools by which you can control the whole of the Middle East. And that sets it up, and we use them in Afghanistan, we use them in Iraq, we use them in Syria. The most extreme elements, we are the ones that we have been backing consistently for the last decades. And it's, and now I can see us going into another round of that by saying everything is the fault of the Islamists. I hope not, though.
Wow. Last question. What do you think the Chinese will do about the seizure of this tanker?
I think they will certainly react. It's not just the tanker. The other thing that happened at the same time was, and again, you have to say, what is Trump thinking when they gave 11 billion of weapons to Taiwan in these last days, announced 11 billion, including missiles, intermediate range missiles that can strike from Taiwan into mainland China, across the straits. Yes, ATACMS and other HIMARS, long-range missiles that can bridge the straits and go straight into China. And the Chinese, you'd be very surprised to hear, are furious. And they say, and I just don't know how to explain it. What is Trump thinking? I mean, I thought he wants and understands that some sort of relationship with China is in the US's economic interest, because the situation in America is economically fragile. Why are you going to do this? Because, what China will do is they won't attack. There won't be an attack in Taiwan, whatever people may fantasize about that. But he has economic tools. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see a big sell-off in US Treasury bills, or that the rare earths suddenly dry up coming to the United States. There will be a reaction, just as Putin promised a reaction to the strike on the tanker. It happened on Friday in the middle of his long answering questions speech, and he said Russia will react to this attack on this on this tanker.
It sounds like there will be plenty of us to watch and look for during the coming Christmas holidays. Alastair, thank you very much. Thank you for your time. Thanks for accommodating my schedule as always. Merry Christmas to you and your family. We'll see you in 2 weeks. All the best, my friend.
Thank you very much, and a happy Christmas to you and to your mother.
Thank you. She'll love hearing that. Thank you, Alastair. All the best. Coming up later today at 10 this morning, Ray McGovern. At 11:30, Larry Johnson. At 2 this afternoon, Professor Glenn Deason. At 4 this afternoon, Scott Ritter. Judge Napolitano for Judging Freedom.